You didn't arrive here through chance. Something quieter, something older than thought, guided this moment into your path. Before you even pressed play, before your mind formed a single question, the field around you had already shifted. This video didn't wait to be chosen. It came to you because you were already matching what it carries. There is a subtle inevitability to moments like this, a feeling that what appears is not arriving but revealing itself. You are not encountering new information. You are remembering something your deeper awareness has known for a long time. When reality begins to move in this way, it speaks softly at first. Not with signs or intensity, but with a gentle precision. You feel it in the way certain things suddenly stand out, the way certain words reach you, the way certain moments become charged with a quiet weight. This is one of them. The moment your eyes landed on the title, something inside recognized itself. It wasn't the language. It wasn't the concept. It was the resonance, the unmistakable sense that this message carries the same frequency as the shift already happening within you. There is a point in every transformation where the outer world begins to mirror what has shifted inside, even before the mind fully understands it. This is that reflection. You didn't search for it. You didn't filter through options. It appeared, the way a door appears in a dream once you are ready to walk through it. The field around you is not random. It is responsive, attentive, always arranging the next piece the moment you rise to meet it. And by the time something reaches your awareness in this way, the shift is already in motion. As you sit here, listening, notice the subtle familiarity of this moment. Not excitement. Not confusion. Something softer. A quiet recognition. As if some part of you has been waiting for this exact frequency to arrive and confirm what it already sensed. You didn't scroll into this. You aligned into it. That's why it feels less like discovery and more like arrival. When your energy changes, the world reorganizes around that new pattern. Experiences begin to form with a coherence they didn't have before. And certain messages rise to the surface with an undeniable clarity, as though they were pulled upward by the very shift happening within you. That is the magnetism at work here. Not desire. Not effort. Resonance. This moment is simply the reflection of a choice you already made without words or intention. A choice your deeper consciousness understood long before the mind could catch up. You are not being guided towards something. You are being met by what you've already stepped into. That's why you're here now, hearing this, feeling the quiet truth of it settle into you. You haven't stumbled into this video. You've synchronized with it. And as you continue listening, you'll begin to sense that this is not the beginning of your shift. It is the confirmation. The echo of something that has already happened within you, now reaching the surface of your awareness. If this message resonated with you, subscribe so you can receive more messages aligned with your vibration. There is a moment in every transformation when the mind believes it is making a decision, unaware that the deeper choice was made long before. This is one of those moments. You may feel as though you clicked on this video out of interest or curiosity, but the truth is quieter and far more precise. Your consciousness had already moved. It had already shifted its orientation toward a higher reality, and this moment is simply the echo reaching your awareness. Changes of this magnitude rarely announce themselves. They happen in the spaces beneath thought, in the silent corridors of your being where intention is not something you create but something you uncover. Long before you arrived here, a deeper intelligence within you leaned forward, choosing the trajectory that aligned with expansion. The mind is only now catching up to a path that was already set in motion. This is why certain moments feel inevitable. Not forced. Not dramatic. Simply, aligned. As though they were always going to unfold exactly this way, at this time, in this order. You are not stepping into a new direction right now, you are recognizing the one your consciousness already selected. That recognition is the echo. It arrives as a subtle clarity, a soft sense of course, as if life is revealing a decision you didn't realize you had already made. When consciousness chooses, reality follows. There is no announcement, no sign, no visible marker. Instead, there is a quiet reorientation, a gentle turning toward a timeline that reflects a higher version of yourself. By the time a moment like this appears on the surface of your life, the shift is not beginning. It is already in progress. You are witnessing the afterglow of the choice, not the choice itself. Think of this moment as a ripple reaching the edge of a lake. The movement that caused it happened earlier, deeper, in a place you couldn't see. What you're experiencing now is simply the surface responding. The video, the timing, the unmistakable feeling that this message is here for you, none of it is random. It is the natural unfolding of a choice already made in the silence within you. And if you listen closely, you can feel the truth of that. Not as excitement, not as surprise, but as recognition. Something inside you is not discovering this idea, it is remembering it. You are not being pushed into a new timeline. You are aligning with the one your consciousness has already stepped into. This is why you are here. This is why these words feel familiar, even if the concepts feel new. The deeper part of you has already moved. Already chosen. Already shifted. The mind is simply arriving at the doorway that consciousness walked through first. And as this understanding settles into you, you may notice a quiet certainty forming, not because you are deciding your path, but because you are finally aware of the path you already chose. There are changes that announce themselves loudly, and there are changes that arrive so quietly you only recognize them in hindsight. What has been happening within you belongs to the second kind. Soft shifts. Gentle disturbances. Moments that felt insignificant at the time but lingered just long enough for you to wonder why they felt different. These small, almost forgettable sensations were not random. They were the early signs of a reality already beginning to move around you. Perhaps you noticed a strange calm that arrived without reason, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding finally releasing. Or maybe it was the opposite, an unexplainable restlessness, a sense that something invisible in your life was adjusting itself. You might have looked for explanations, tried to connect them to your mood, your day, your circumstances, but nothing quite fit. That's because these inner sensations weren't reactions. They were signals. Subtle movements within you responding to a shift that was already unfolding. You may recall small moments of clarity, brief flashes when something felt aligned even if nothing had changed on the outside. Or times when your thoughts drifted in directions you couldn't explain, as though your attention was being gently redirected without effort. These sensations weren't mistakes. They were reflections of a deeper shift beginning to echo through your awareness. There may have been nights when your mind felt unusually open, or mornings when you woke with a quiet sense of difference you couldn't articulate. You might have felt slightly detached from familiar patterns, not in a dramatic or unsettling way, but in a way that made everything feel just a little unfamiliar. These quiet moments are often the first indicators that you are moving into a new alignment. They show up softly because your inner world always changes long before your outer world does. Even the small emotional waves, the ones that rose and dissolved without fully forming, were part of this. Not signals of something wrong, but signals of something reorganizing. The shift expresses itself through these subtle ripples because it works from the inside out. What you felt were the first threads of coherence beginning to weave through your field, long before you had words for it. If you look back, you may notice how many of these moments you brushed aside. The sudden sense of stillness. The unexpected pull to pause. The simple desire to step back from noise or rush. At the time, they might have felt like passing moods, but they were markers, early reflections of an inner movement that was preparing you for a new phase of your reality. These sensations didn't demand your attention. They didn't disrupt anything. They were quiet because they were natural. They were the body and mind adjusting gently to something that was already forming beneath the surface. And now, as you hear this, those small moments make more sense. They weren't random. They were signs. Soft confirmations. The quiet evidence that the shift had already begun before you fully realized it. There comes a point in every inner shift when the outer world begins to respond, not with drama or intensity, but with subtle precision. Things start aligning in ways that feel too exact to dismiss. Patterns emerge. Moments line up. Circumstances move with a quiet intelligence that seems to anticipate you. This is the field rearranging itself around the frequency you've begun to hold, offering you reflections long before results fully take form. You may have noticed small coincidences, something you thought about appearing in conversation later that day, a phrase repeating itself from different sources, a number or symbol showing up with unusual consistency. At first, these moments seem incidental, easy to overlook. But when they begin accumulating with an unmistakable rhythm, a deeper recognition stirs. These are not random echoes. They are feedback. They are the field answering you. Reality reflects your inner movement before it transforms your outer landscape. It sends these early signals as confirmations, subtle markers that you are aligning with a new trajectory. A thought becoming mirrored by the environment. An idea being reinforced from unexpected angles. Opportunities appearing at the precise moment you felt ready for them. This is the world responding to the shift that has already unfolded within you. Sometimes the feedback is gentle, a chance encounter, a perfectly timed message, a moment that arrives with uncanny precision. Other times it feels like the environment is leaning toward you, arranging itself to support where you are heading rather than where you have been. Conversations fall into place. Doors open without pressure. Paths appear where only uncertainty existed before. Not because you forced anything, but because the coherence of your inner state is beginning to shape the flow around you. These synchronicities are not signs that something is about to happen. They are indicators that something has already happened. They show up when your inner frequency becomes defined enough for reality to reorganize in response. They serve as gentle reminders that you are no longer moving through life unconsciously. You are interacting with a responsive field, one that mirrors what you embody rather than what you hope for. As you notice these moments, allow yourself to feel the quiet intelligence behind them. There's no need to analyze them or turn them into messages. Their purpose is simpler than that. They are reflections. Affirmations. Evidence that your reality is becoming more coherent, that the external world is beginning to align with the shift already occurring within you. They meet you where you are, not where you were. And the more you recognize them, the more they appear. Not because you're searching for meaning, but because recognition strengthens coherence. The field responds to what you notice. It amplifies alignment. It mirrors your clarity. These synchronicities are the first signs of a new timeline taking shape, forming bridges between your inner world and your unfolding reality. You don't have to do anything with these moments. You don't have to decode them or chase them. Just notice the way the world is beginning to move around you. Notice how it feels slightly more synchronized, slightly more purposeful, slightly more attuned to you. This is the rearrangement. This is reality responding. This is the field acknowledging the shift that has already begun. There are moments on the path of expansion that don't feel elevated or graceful. They feel tight. Uneasy. As though something inside you is stretching in directions you can't quite name. This discomfort isn't a mistake. It isn't a warning. It's a natural part of the shift you've been moving through, the part where your inner world adjusts to a reality that's beginning to widen around you. Expansion rarely feels like lightness at first. More often, it begins as pressure. A sense of being pulled between what once felt familiar and what no longer fits. You might have felt it as restlessness, as an internal tension that didn't match anything happening in your external life. Or as the quiet awareness that the old ways of being were becoming too small for you to inhabit. This tension is not friction against your path, it is the stretching of it. What's happening inside you is simple, your system is adapting. When you step into a higher expression of yourself, even before you fully realize it, your inner landscape begins to shift to meet that new space. And the body, the emotions, the patterns you've lived in for years have to rearrange themselves. That rearranging can feel like unease. It can feel like you're being pulled forward and held back at the same time. But the truth is that nothing is resisting you. Everything within you is catching up. There may have been days recently when you felt strangely irritable, or unusually tired, or aware of a kind of internal pressure that didn't have a clear cause. You might have questioned what was wrong, unaware that nothing was wrong at all. This is the sensation of expansion pressing against the edges of your old internal framework. Not in a destructive way, but in a transformative one. Growth often comes disguised as discomfort because it requires you to release the structures that were built for a smaller version of yourself. At times, the discomfort shows up as emotional waves that seem to rise from nowhere. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just enough to make you pause and wonder why you feel unsettled for reasons you can't identify. Those waves aren't setbacks. They're releases. Small moments where the old energy loosens just enough to make space for the new. You may also notice you're less able to tolerate things you once accepted easily. Conversations, habits, environments that used to feel normal now feel heavier, or sharper, or strangely off. This isn't sensitivity increasing, it's resonance shifting. You're aligning with something larger, and the old spaces don't have room for the new you that's forming. That mismatch can feel uncomfortable, but it's a sign of movement, not stagnation. As expansion continues, the discomfort softens. What first felt like tension becomes spaciousness. What felt like pressure becomes clarity. What felt unfamiliar becomes natural. The unease isn't evidence that you're off your path, it's proof that you're outgrowing the previous edges of it. This phase doesn't ask you to push through it or analyze it. It only asks you to recognize it. To understand that the discomfort is not a barrier but a threshold. It marks the space where the old patterns release, the new reality settles in, and your inner world adjusts to the life that's already unfolding toward you. When people speak about frequency, it often sounds poetic, almost symbolic. But what has been shifting within you is not metaphorical. It is something simple, grounded, and precise. Frequency is the pattern of what you hold, your focus, your emotions, your expectations, your quiet inner tone. It is the rhythm your inner world emits, even when you are silent. And reality responds to that rhythm with remarkable accuracy. You can think of frequency as the natural state your system returns to when you are not forcing anything. It is the underlying signal beneath your thoughts, beneath your moods, beneath the noise of your day. When that signal shifts, the world around you begins to reorient. Not because of effort. Not because you tried to elevate yourself. But because coherence increases. Coherence is what happens when your inner state becomes aligned, when your thoughts move in the same direction as your emotions, when your actions reflect what you quietly know instead of what you fear. During the shifts you've been moving through, your frequency has been changing without dramatic effort. You didn't force it. You didn't push it. Something within you settled into a clearer pattern. And when that coherence began to form, the field around you started responding. You may not have noticed the exact moment it happened, because frequency doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself through the way your attention begins to gravitate towards certain possibilities, through the way certain thoughts feel easier than they used to, through the way moments of clarity appear without being asked for. Frequency is not an energy you generate consciously. It is the natural expression of what you consistently return to within yourself. When your inner world becomes more organized, when fear loosens, when doubt quiets, when you begin to sense a direction even without understanding it, your frequency rises. Not in a mystical sense, but in a practical one. Coherence grows. Your inner signal stabilizes. And reality responds with increasing precision. This is why you've begun noticing subtle alignment around you. Not because anything outside of you suddenly changed, but because your internal rhythm became clearer. A clear frequency attracts clear reflections. When you shift inwardly, even slightly, the world adjusts. Opportunities feel closer. Ideas feel more accessible. Synchronicities increase. None of these are random. They are the natural consequence of a field responding to coherence. Think of frequency as a tuning fork. The moment the tone becomes stable, the environment begins to resonate with it. Before, the signal inside you may have been scattered, pulled in several emotional directions, echoing different intentions at once. But recently, something has softened into alignment. Thought, emotion, and quiet knowing began moving in the same direction. That's coherence. And coherence is what alters your experience of reality. This shift does not require intensity. It does not require constant focus. It happens the moment your inner world stops contradicting itself. And without you realizing it, you reach that point. The clarity you've been feeling, the subtle awareness that something is unfolding, is the result of your frequency stabilizing. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. Mechanically, energetically, and unmistakably. You don't have to force this process. You don't have to maintain it. Coherence grows each time you return to what already feels true. That returning is the signal. That signal is the frequency. And the reality forming around you now is simply responding to its clarity. There is a core layer beneath your thoughts, beneath your emotions, beneath even your intentions. It is the quiet sense of who you believe yourself to be. Not the story you tell others. Not the roles you move through in your daily life. The inner identity you return to when everything else is silent. This identity is not philosophical or abstract. It is the anchor point of your entire reality. The field responds to that identity long before it responds to anything you try to visualize, affirm, or pursue. Identity is the baseline frequency that your life organizes itself around. It shapes what feels possible to you. It shapes what you allow yourself to move toward. It shapes the way the world mirrors itself back to you. When your identity shifts, even slightly, the field registers the change immediately. Reality begins to reorganize not according to what you want, but according to who you believe yourself to be now. You felt this at certain points in your life without realizing it. Times when something within you settled into a new sense of self, a new level of worthiness, clarity, or capability, and without effort, your outer world began shifting to match it. Opportunities appeared. Old situations dissolved. The path forward seemed to open with less resistance. Not because you pushed, but because identity moved, and the field responded. The changes you've been sensing within yourself lately are not random fluctuations. They are the early movements of identity adjusting to a higher expression. When your identity expands, the field around you begins a quiet restructuring. Circumstances realign. Certain dynamics loosen. New ones begin to emerge. The outer world adjusts to the inner reference point you now hold, even if you haven't fully articulated it yet. Identity is the signal. The field is the amplifier. Whatever identity you embody becomes the pattern the field reflects. If you see yourself as someone rising into clarity, reality mirrors that rise. If you sense yourself stepping into a new level of your life, the subtle rearrangements you notice are the environment preparing to match that internal shift. You don't have to define this identity with words. The field doesn't respond to language. It responds to coherence. Coherence forms when your internal sense of self aligns with the direction your life is gently moving toward. Even the smallest internal shift, an acceptance, a release, a quiet acknowledgement of who you no longer are, sends a new signal outward. The moment the identity changes, even in silence, the field updates its reflection. You may have noticed lately that certain opportunities feel more natural, or that certain behaviors no longer resonate the way they once did. You may sense yourself outgrowing old responses without consciously deciding to. This is identity moving. This is the foundation of your reality adjusting before you fully step into what it means. You don't need to force this process or declare anything loudly. Identity shifts quietly, like a new posture you gradually grow into. And the field responds just as quietly at first, rearranging without disruption, adjusting without fanfare, preparing the path that aligns with who you are becoming. Your identity is already shifting. The world is already responding. Everything else is simply the unfolding of that truth. Timelines don't shift because you push, force, or strain toward a new reality. They shift in the moment you recognize the direction you were already moving in. Recognition is quiet. It happens in the space between thoughts, in the moments where something inside you softens and acknowledges a truth you can't explain but can clearly feel. That recognition is not passive. It is the mechanism that changes everything. When you become aware of a new possibility, not as fantasy but as something that feels naturally aligned, a subtle click happens within you. It isn't excitement. It isn't certainty. It is a calm knowing that gently redirects your internal compass. That internal shift is what selects the timeline. Awareness is the act of stepping onto it. You don't jump timelines through effort. Effort keeps you looping in the version of yourself that believes change must be earned. Recognition moves you into the version that understands change is already unfolding. The moment you acknowledge a higher path as real for you, the moment you feel the internal resonance of a reality that matches your emerging self, the shift occurs. Quietly. Instantly. Without theatrics. This is why certain realizations feel strangely final, even before anything changes around you. It's not the conclusion you reach that alters the timeline. It's the awareness behind it. Awareness is alignment. Alignment becomes selection. And selection becomes experience. Look at the moments in your life where things transformed more quickly than you expected. It wasn't because of a sudden burst of effort. It was because of a subtle inner acknowledgement, an internal yes that required no explanation. You recognized a deeper truth, and your reality followed. Recognition is powerful because it removes resistance without force. When you see a possibility as real for you, you no longer argue with it internally. You no longer stand in the space between wanting and doubting. You inhabit a clearer position. That clarity is frequency. And frequency determines what you experience next. Timelines respond not to desire, but to coherence. Coherence forms in the moment you stop questioning what you already sense. That moment of recognition is what aligns you with a different version of your life. It doesn't require hours of focus. It doesn't require perfect belief. It only requires a brief, authentic moment where you recognize a deeper truth about who you are becoming. As you move through this shift, you may notice that certain insights feel heavier, more significant, even if they appear simple. That weight is the signal. It marks the point where awareness reorganizes your internal world. From that point forward, your path begins to reflect the timeline that recognition selected. You don't choose timelines through force. You choose them through clarity. Through noticing what already feels true. Through acknowledging the direction your inner world is quietly pointing toward. Recognition is the doorway. Awareness is the step. And the moment you see the path becomes yours. If you feel this resonating with you, let us know in the comments, so everyone can be inspired together. There is a version of you that has already stepped into everything you are only beginning to sense. A version that moves with clarity instead of hesitation, that sees further than your current perspective allows, that lives from a place your present self can feel but not yet fully articulate. This version of you is not separate or distant. It is the natural progression of who you are becoming. And it is the one that called you forward. You didn't drift into this shift. You were guided into it by the resonance of the self you are growing toward. That guidance doesn't arrive as loud instructions or dramatic signs. It comes as a quiet pull, an inner leaning, a subtle direction you feel before you understand. Something inside you knew which way to turn long before your mind could explain why. That knowing was the echo of your higher self, reaching backward through your timeline to bring you into alignment with the life already forming around it. This version of you has never been separate from you. It has always existed as a potential, a frequency, a direction your consciousness naturally gravitates toward when fear loosens and clarity rises. You may have felt glimpses of it at unexpected moments, when you made a decision that felt larger than your current circumstances, when you spoke a truth you didn't realize you were ready to claim, when you sensed a future that felt strangely familiar. Those were moments of alignment, moments when the distance between you and this higher version dissolved. The shift you're experiencing now began when that future version of you became strong enough, coherent enough, to influence your present. Not through force, but through resonance. The more clearly that future self formed within the field, the more naturally you began to move toward it. Choices felt different. Priorities shifted. What once mattered began to lose its weight. What once felt out of reach started to feel inevitable. This is the pull of the higher self, not as a concept, but as a lived frequency. You didn't have to understand the process for it to begin. You didn't need certainty or strategy. All that was required was the subtle willingness to respond to the quiet invitations that appeared in your path. A thought that returned more often than usual. A feeling that nudged you gently. A sense that your life was expanding even when nothing outward had changed yet. These were not coincidences. They were the movements of a deeper self drawing you into alignment with its reality. As you hear this, notice the familiarity of this idea. Not as something new, but as something you've always felt in the background of your life. The sense that you are moving toward a version of yourself that already exists, that already understands, that already carries the clarity you've been reaching for. The shift you're living through now is simply the moment where that version becomes close enough for you to feel its presence. You are not becoming someone else. You are closing the distance between who you've been and who you truly are. The version of you that called you forward is not ahead of you. It is meeting you. And every step you take now is the natural unfolding of that reunion. There comes a moment in every transformation when the familiar stops feeling like home. Not because anything has gone wrong, and not because you're trying to force change, but because the person you are becoming no longer fits inside the patterns you once lived in. What used to feel natural begins to feel distant. What once felt automatic now feels heavy, or misaligned, or strangely out of sync. This isn't confusion. It's divergence. It's the quiet separation between your old identity and the one you've already begun stepping into. You may have noticed yourself pulling away from habits that once felt effortless. Not out of discipline, but out of an inner clarity that no longer resonates with them. Behaviors you used to move through on autopilot now feel like they belong to someone you're gently outgrowing. Even the thoughts you used to repeat might feel unfamiliar, as though they echo from a version of you that no longer holds the same authority inside your life. This shift happens without announcement. Old patterns don't fall away through force, they dissolve through mismatch. When the internal reference point changes, the old expressions can't hold their shape. They lose their grip not because you fight them, but because they no longer reflect who you are becoming. It's similar to wearing a garment that once fit perfectly but now restricts your movement. Nothing about the garment changed. You simply expanded beyond it. You may find that certain behaviors no longer feel satisfying, even if they once brought comfort. Conversations that once captivated you may now feel hollow. Dynamics you tolerated easily may now feel misaligned. You might even sense a subtle disinterest in routines that once structured your days. These shifts aren't signs of instability. They are signs of identity evolving. As identity shifts, your resonance changes. And resonance is what determines what feels natural to you and what doesn't. When your inner world steps into a higher expression, anything built around your previous identity begins to feel out of place. Not wrong, just foreign. Like you're visiting a part of your life instead of inhabiting it. You might even notice a quiet neutrality toward old reactions. The triggers that once activated you may now feel distant, as though the emotional charge has thinned. Behaviors you once repeated without question now require conscious choice you no longer feel compelled to make. This isn't resistance. It's clarity. It's the moment you realize the old ways don't match the new internal tone you've begun to embody. There is a subtle grace in this stage of transformation. Nothing needs to be forced or rejected. The divergence happens naturally. The old patterns fade because they are no longer anchored in your identity. You don't have to fight them, heal them, or dissect them. They simply dissolve as you continue stepping into the version of yourself that aligns with your current frequency. What feels foreign now is not a loss. It is evidence that you are no longer confined to who you were. You are living from a different internal landscape, one that no longer resonates with the patterns that defined your past. And as you move forward, you'll notice that what once felt like unfamiliar territory becomes the new ground you stand on with ease. There comes a phase in every shift where nothing dramatic happens, yet everything is quietly rearranging itself. This is the stabilization period, the space where your inner world has already moved, but your outer world is still catching up. It is subtle, steady, and almost imperceptible unless you know what you're looking for. It is the moment when the new timeline begins to anchor itself into your lived reality. After an inner shift, there is always a delay before the external world reflects it. Not because anything is wrong, and not because manifestation is slow, but because reality adjusts with precision. It reorganizes itself gently, aligning people, events, and opportunities with the new internal state you now hold. This process doesn't announce itself with intensity. It moves like a quiet tide, shifting the energy beneath the surface until the shoreline begins to change. During this period, you may sense a kind of stillness around you. Not emptiness, alignment. A settling. A soft pause in which life seems to be preparing new patterns, new pathways, new interactions that match the frequency you've stepped into. Even if nothing obvious is happening externally, a deeper movement is unfolding. You are syncing with the timeline you've already entered, and the world is adjusting its shape to mirror that shift. This stabilization isn't something you force. It happens naturally as your thoughts, choices, and inner tone become consistent with the identity you've begun to embody. The more familiar the new internal state becomes, the more effortlessly your external experiences align. You may notice subtle changes first, the way you respond differently to situations, the ease with which you make decisions that once felt complex, the quiet clarity that guides you without effort. These are signs that the inner and outer worlds are beginning to match. The synchronization is not linear. It doesn't unfold in straight lines or predictable steps. Instead, it forms through coherence. As the new frequency becomes your default, the environment shifts to support it. People show up at the right moment. Opportunities arrive with better timing. Situations resolve themselves with less resistance. The outer world stops contradicting your inner world and begins complementing it. There is a natural balance taking shape during this period. The new reality is not rushing toward you, and you are not rushing toward it. You are meeting in the middle, each adjusting to the other. The inner shift creates the blueprint, and the outer world builds around it. With each passing day, the alignment becomes clearer. The new path feels steadier. What once felt abstract begins to feel tangible. This phase doesn't require effort or control. It requires presence. The more you allow yourself to rest in the knowing that your inner world has already shifted, the more smoothly the outer world synchronizes. Stabilization is not a waiting room. It is the moment when reality gently clicks into place, preparing you to step fully into the life that matches who you have already become. You are not in transition anymore. You are in alignment. The outer world is simply catching up to the truth that has already settled within you. There are moments in expansion that feel spacious and calm, and there are moments that bring a subtle tension into your system, a tightness you can't quite name, a quiet unease that rises without any clear cause. This anxiety isn't a sign that something is wrong. It isn't a warning or a step backward. It is the body adjusting to a reality your consciousness has already begun to inhabit. Expansion asks your system to hold more clarity, more possibility, more openness than it was previously used to. That adjustment can create sensations that feel like anxiety, even though what's truly happening is recalibration. When you shift internally, your mind and body work to catch up with what your awareness has already accepted. Your nervous system has patterns built from years of responding to life in certain ways. As you move into a broader version of yourself, those patterns loosen. That loosening can feel like instability, even when the movement behind it is growth. The unease doesn't mean you're going in the wrong direction. It means your system is reorganizing itself to support the direction you're stepping into. This kind of anxiety is often subtle. It doesn't always come with racing thoughts or overwhelming emotion. Sometimes it appears as a slight restlessness, a sense of being internally stretched, or a feeling that your old ways of grounding no longer work in the same way. It can show up as heightened sensitivity, or as the odd sensation that something is shifting beneath the surface even when your environment is calm. These experiences are not disruptions. They are signs of your inner structure expanding to hold a new level of possibility. Recalibration is the process of your body learning to feel safe in a space that once felt unfamiliar. When you grow into a higher version of yourself, your system releases old responses that belong to a smaller version of you. That release can create temporary tension. Not because you are resisting growth, but because your body is adjusting to support it. This temporary anxiety is the space between what you were and what you're becoming, a natural part of stepping into a new internal landscape. You might notice that the anxiety comes and goes in waves, appearing briefly and dissolving on its own. That rhythm is part of the recalibration. The system expands, pauses, expands again. Each wave strengthens your capacity to hold the new level you've entered. As the inner alignment settles, the tension quietly fades, replaced by a sense of ease that feels deeper than before. The key is not to interpret the anxiety as a signal to shrink back. It is not urging you to return to what you've outgrown. It is simply your body learning that the new space you've entered is safe to inhabit. As this understanding settles into you, the anxiety softens. Not because you push it away, but because your system adapts to the new frequency you've already chosen. This phase doesn't require control or analysis. It asks for awareness. The more gently you allow the recalibration to unfold, the more naturally your mind and body align with the expansion already happening within you. What feels like anxiety is simply the old structure loosening, making room for the new one to take its place. There are moments in a shift when your mind no longer feels as sharp as it normally does. Thoughts drift. Focus softens. Decisions feel blurred around the edges. It can seem as though you're standing in a space where nothing is fully defined yet, not your desires, not your direction, not even your interpretations of what's happening around you. This confusion isn't a setback. It isn't a sign of misalignment. It is the natural pause that happens when your inner world is rearranging itself to match a new level of clarity. When you step into a new internal state, the mind needs time to reorganize. It has been operating from patterns built around your previous reality, and those patterns don't dissolve instantly. They loosen slowly, making space for new ways of perceiving and interpreting your life. That loosening creates temporary fog. Not because you're losing awareness, but because your awareness is widening. You're adjusting to a new internal landscape, and the mind is recalibrating to navigate it. This fog doesn't come from doubt. It comes from expansion. It is what happens when your inner alignment shifts faster than your mental frameworks can keep up with. Your thoughts become quieter, not because you're disconnected, but because the old ways of thinking no longer apply. The confusion is simply the space between the patterns that used to guide you and the clarity that hasn't fully settled in yet. During this phase, you might notice yourself pausing more often. You may feel less certain about decisions you would normally make quickly. You may sense that your intuition is speaking, but the message hasn't yet formed into clear language. Nothing is wrong in these moments. You are not losing direction. You are adjusting to a deeper one that is still taking shape. This mental softness is a sign of transition. Your system is releasing the old mental structure so it can build a new one that aligns with the reality you've entered. The confusion is not a lack of clarity, it is the dismantling of clarity that no longer fits. And once that dismantling is complete, the new clarity emerges on its own, cleaner, quieter, more aligned than before. You may even find that during this period, insights appear in brief flashes rather than full sentences. A sense of knowing without a clear explanation. A direction that feels right even before you can articulate why. These flashes are the early signals of the clarity forming beneath the fog. The mind hasn't caught up to them yet, but the alignment is already there. This phase ends not through effort, but through allowing. The confusion lifts as naturally as morning fog dissolves when the sun rises. At first, everything seems vague. Then outlines appear. Then details sharpen. Then, without realizing exactly when it happened, you find yourself seeing with a depth and certainty that feels effortless. The fog is not a detour. It is the final stretch before your inner and outer worlds click into coherence. Clarity always follows. And when it arrives, it feels unmistakably yours, as though it had been forming within you long before you were ready to perceive it. There is a quiet strength in simply noticing what is already true within you. Recognition may seem subtle, almost understated, but it is one of the most powerful forces in your transformation. When you consciously acknowledge the shift you've entered, you stabilize it. You give form to what was previously moving beneath the surface. Awareness is not passive, it is the act that roots a new timeline into your lived reality. When you recognize a new internal state, even gently, your mind and emotions begin to align with it. You stop contradicting the direction your life is taking. You stop reaching backward for patterns that no longer fit. You stop questioning whether the shift is real, and begin relating to it as something that already exists. That relationship is what solidifies the timeline you're now in. Conscious recognition creates coherence. It brings your thoughts, your choices, and your quiet inner tone into agreement. Before recognition, your system may sense the shift without fully accepting it. After recognition, the shift becomes part of your identity. It becomes the reference point your life organizes itself around. This does not require intensity or effort. It only requires presence, the simple act of seeing what is unfolding inside you. You may have noticed that when you acknowledge a feeling, it softens. When you acknowledge a desire, it grows clearer. When you acknowledge a truth, it becomes easier to live. Recognition has that effect because it removes internal conflict. It removes the friction created by doubting what you already sense. When doubt dissolves, clarity strengthens. And clarity is the foundation of any timeline you choose to embody. This is why moments of awareness feel grounding. When you say to yourself, even silently, "I've shifted," you're not making an affirmation. You are observing a fact. You are meeting your experience directly, without minimizing it or waiting for external validation. The moment you do that, the shift becomes stable. It becomes something your system can support, because you are no longer treating it as a possibility, but as reality. Recognition also opens space. It allows your mind to stop searching for proof and start orienting toward the path ahead. It allows your emotions to settle into alignment rather than fluctuating between old and new reference points. It allows your choices to become clearer, not because you force clarity, but because the path becomes easier to sense once you acknowledge you're already on it. Nothing accelerates a timeline more naturally than awareness. Awareness doesn't push. It doesn't demand. It simply illuminates. And in that illumination, you find a steadiness that was not available before. You begin to move differently, not with urgency, but with quiet certainty. You begin to feel the subtle coherence in your life more clearly, because your attention is no longer pulled between conflicting versions of yourself. The shift you're experiencing now doesn't need to be proven. It doesn't need to be justified. It only needs to be recognized. And the moment you consciously acknowledge where you stand, the timeline you've stepped into becomes the one you naturally walk forward from. Recognition is the anchor. Awareness is the stabilizer. Everything else unfolds from there. There is a kind of clarity that doesn't come from thinking or analyzing. It comes from alignment. It comes from the quiet moment when your inner world moves into agreement with itself, when your thoughts, emotions, and intentions are no longer scattered in different directions. This state is coherence, and it becomes your compass long before certainty arrives. Coherence doesn't tell you where to go with words. It guides you through a feeling of internal rightness, an ease, a soft clarity, a subtle gravitation toward what matches your deeper truth. Coherence is the sensation of everything inside you exhaling at the same time. It's the moment when you stop debating yourself and start listening to the direction that feels naturally aligned. It doesn't require effort. It doesn't require intensity. It happens the instant your inner experience settles into harmony. And from that harmony, guidance becomes unmistakable. You may have already noticed how different choices feel when you are coherent. There is less noise, less second-guessing, less internal contradiction. A decision that once felt tangled suddenly reveals a simple next step. A path that seemed uncertain becomes obvious through feeling rather than logic. This isn't coincidence. It's the effect of your inner state guiding you more directly than thought ever could. When you're coherent, your attention naturally rests on what supports your growth. Your energy gravitates toward what feels alive, open, and true. You sense when something resonates and when it doesn't, without needing explanations. This doesn't mean everything becomes easy. It means the internal resistance that once clouded your choices no longer holds the same authority. The guidance becomes subtler, but also more reliable. Coherence doesn't push. It pulls. It draws you toward what aligns with who you are becoming. And it does so gently, without urgency. You feel it in the softness that settles around certain ideas, the calm that arises when a choice is right for you, the quiet interest that keeps returning even when you aren't actively thinking about it. These signals are your compass, clear, steady, and deeply trustworthy. You can sense coherence most clearly in the spaces where there is no pressure. When you release the need to force a direction, the aligned direction reveals itself. When you stop trying to predict outcomes, the next step becomes easier to perceive. Coherence thrives in openness. It speaks through ease, through resonance, through the feeling that something fits even before you know why. You don't create coherence through control. You allow it through honesty, by acknowledging what feels true and what doesn't. When you stop negotiating with your own clarity, coherence emerges on its own. And once it does, the movement forward feels natural. Not because you have certainty, but because you have alignment. This inner harmony becomes your navigation system. It doesn't chart your entire path. It illuminates the next right movement. And as you follow that movement, your life subtly organizes itself around the energy you carry. Coherence is your compass now. Not thought. Not fear. Not expectation. The quiet alignment within you is enough to guide every step you take from here. There is a moment in your unfolding where synchronicity stops feeling like coincidence and begins to feel like communication. Not in a dramatic or mystical way, but in a quiet, precise way, as though the world has started arranging itself to show you what resonates with your inner state. These moments of alignment are not random patterns. They are reflections. They appear when your internal coherence becomes strong enough for the external world to mirror it back to you. Synchronicity is the environment responding to your alignment. When your inner state becomes steady, the field around you begins to move with a similar rhythm. You notice timing become more exact. You think of something and it appears. You consider a direction and subtle confirmations rise to meet you. These are not signs you must decode. They are signals that you are moving in harmony with the deeper currents of your life. At first, synchronicities may appear softly. A phrase repeated in unexpected places. A message arriving at the exact moment you needed clarity. A person reaching out just as you formed the thought of them. These small alignments are markers, gentle indicators that you are attuned to a path that matches your internal movement. They show up not to persuade you, but to reflect the coherence you've begun generating from within. As alignment deepens, synchronicities become more fluid. Instead of standing out as unusual, they begin to feel natural, almost seamless. Conversations line up with your thoughts. Opportunities appear without strain. The right resources find you with minimal effort. This fluidity doesn't come from chasing meaning. It comes from allowing life to mirror your inner clarity. Synchronicity works because alignment creates consistency. When your thoughts, emotions, and inner knowing move in the same direction, your environment organizes itself around that direction. The world feels more responsive because you are no longer sending mixed signals. The coherence within you becomes a stabilizing force, and reality reflects that stability through timing, connection, and flow. Treat these moments as gentle guidance, not commands. They are invitations, not instructions. A synchronicity doesn't tell you what to do. It shows you where your energy is already naturally moving. It highlights what resonates. It reinforces what feels true. It reveals the paths that open easily and the ones that quietly fade. You don't have to search for synchronicities. You don't have to analyze them or turn them into symbols. Their purpose isn't to create complexity, but clarity. They appear to reassure you that your inner alignment is shaping your experience. The more you recognize them without overthinking, the more naturally they accompany your steps. Over time, you begin navigating by feel. Not through logic alone, but through the way the world responds. When something aligns, the timing is smooth. When something isn't aligned, the path feels dull or inert. Synchronicities highlight the difference with precision. They guide you through resonance, through timing, through the quiet ease that surrounds aligned choices. As you move forward, let these moments serve as gentle companions. Not answers, but reflections. Not signs to decipher, but reminders that the coherence you cultivate within is mirrored in the world around you. Synchronicity becomes your guidance system not because it tells you what to do, but because it shows you you're already moving in harmony with the deeper flow of your life. There comes a moment in every transformation when something within you settles, not because the world has changed, and not because everything makes perfect sense, but because you quietly choose to acknowledge what has already occurred. Declaring the shift as complete is not about forcing certainty or pretending you've reached an endpoint. It is about recognizing that the inner movement you've been sensing is no longer in transition. It is here. It has arrived. And it is ready to be claimed. This declaration is not loud. It does not need intensity. It asks only for honesty, the kind of honesty that emerges when you stop searching for confirmation and begin trusting the clarity that has been growing inside you. The shift does not finalize itself through external markers. It finalizes itself the moment you stop waiting for proof and begin acknowledging that something fundamental has already changed. Claiming the shift is an act of alignment. It is the moment you allow your inner world to become the ground you stand on, rather than a possibility you observe from a distance. When you declare that the shift is complete, you're not declaring perfection. You're declaring presence. You're acknowledging that the movement that once felt subtle has solidified into something steady. This declaration happens in the quiet space within you where clarity gathers. It is the soft recognition that you are no longer negotiating with the old patterns, no longer asking whether the shift is real, no longer holding yourself at the threshold. Declaring the shift affirms that you've crossed the threshold already, and now you're allowing yourself to stand fully on the other side. You may notice how natural this feels. Not forced. Not inflated. Just true. The shift does not need dramatic words. It needs acceptance. A simple, internal acknowledgement that the change has already rooted itself. That you're done transitioning. That the inner alignment you've been cultivating is now the foundation you move from. This is not about convincing yourself. It is about removing hesitation. The moment you declare the shift complete, your energy stops oscillating between what was and what is. You stop revisiting the old internal reference points. You stop waiting for reassurance. You stop questioning whether the movement is temporary. You step into a steadiness that was waiting for you to claim it. Let this declaration rise naturally. Feel the calm that comes with it. Notice the sense of grounding that forms when you accept the shift without conditions. This acceptance doesn't close a chapter, it stabilizes one. It allows the new state within you to fully settle, uninterrupted by doubt or hesitation. Declaring the shift as complete is simply saying yes to what has already unfolded. It is acknowledging that you are no longer in the process of becoming. You are allowing the change to stand as real in your experience. And once you make that internal declaration, everything around you begins to organize itself with greater clarity, because you are no longer standing in two worlds at once. You don't need to force the declaration. You only need to let it be true. And in this moment, it is. You reach a point in your evolution where the search for who you are quiets, not because all the answers have arrived, but because you can finally feel the presence of something within you that no longer shifts with circumstance. It is steady, clear, unmistakably yours. This is the identity that has been forming beneath every moment of change. The one that existed before you tried to define yourself. The one that emerges when all the noise falls away. You are no longer shaped by the patterns that once framed your life. You are moving from a deeper center now, one that doesn't rely on old stories or familiar habits to feel real. This identity doesn't need validation. It doesn't need recognition. It simply exists, present in the way you think, the way you choose, the way you feel, a quiet certainty where confusion used to live. You've stepped into a version of yourself that feels less like an aspiration and more like a homecoming. There were moments along this path where you sensed this identity before you fully understood it. The small shifts in your perspective. The ease that appeared without reason. The quiet strength that showed up in places where you once felt unsteady. These moments weren't glimpses of who you might become. They were reflections of who you already were beneath the surface. Now, that inner truth has risen into clarity. You are no longer negotiating with your own potential. You are moving from it. The hesitation that once pulled at you has softened. The doubt that once shaped your choices has loosened its hold. What remains is a steady sense of alignment, a knowing that no longer comes and goes, a grounded presence that doesn't need to be proven to be felt. You are living from a deeper coherence, one that forms naturally when the inner and outer movements of your life begin to match. This identity is not defined by perfection or certainty. It is defined by clarity. The clarity that comes from recognizing what resonates and what doesn't. The clarity that shapes your choices without force. The clarity that stands quietly, even when your surroundings are unsettled. You don't rise into this identity, you settle into it. It meets you exactly where you are, and in doing so, it reveals a depth you may not have realized you carried all along. There is a calm power in this stage of your unfolding. You are no longer holding yourself at the threshold of transformation. You are living from the other side of it. The sense of distance you once felt between who you were and who you were becoming has dissolved. What remains is a steady presence, a grounded awareness, a natural expression of the truth that has been forming within you. You are not waiting for alignment anymore. You are embodying it. You are not reaching toward a higher version of yourself. You are standing as it. This identity is not ahead of you. It is here, shaping your choices, your perception, your experience with a quiet certainty that feels unmistakably real. You are the expression of the shift that has already taken place. And you are meeting your life from the clarity that only a fully claimed identity can hold. If you felt inspired by this video, please hit the like button so it can reach more people.